Hi, this is International Master and author John Watson. This lecture series presents various repertoires for white and for black. And although these are mainly for inexperienced and average players, for example club players, maybe lower level tournament players, all of the systems have been played by grandmasters, usually a number of super grandmasters, and these are all playable on a high level. This is the third lecture in our new repertoire series on the Queen's Gambit declined for white. The idea is to play d4, d5, and knight f3 first before playing c4. This will be followed by c4 in most cases. And our later series, black is going to play e6 at some point soon in the next two moves. In our later series, we'll look at the Slav defense in which black plays c6, and we'll look at the Queen's Gambit accepted, which is when after white plays c4, black captures it. So our main line has been this so far, this, and that's the Queen's Gambit declined. And we've been looking at the most popular move, which can also rise by other move orders, which is one reason it's the most popular move. And then instead of a traditional move like bishop g5, we've been playing bishop f4, which is also a major move, but not anywhere near as popular over the years. So as I say, the main move here was bishop e7. We're going to take a last look at this position tonight, showing some of the fourth move alternatives. And last look at bishop e7, the game we were looking at last week, but then also some of the fourth move alternatives. And then the next few weeks we'll look at black's deviations on the fourth move here, and on the third move, and on even the second move. For example, we might even play something like this, and then when white plays here we might look at this. Well, we will look at that. Sort of a Tarrasch defense. So real quickly then, before I continue, I want to mention that last week in the game Sokolov-Meyer I made a mistake in the note to the main line, beginning with 16 knight d4 for black, and then ed4, b6, 18 king d2, and 18 ... bishop b7 for black. I had white playing rook d7, when I then said that after bishop takes g2, rook g1 gave white threats, but I missed that simply 20 rook a1 trapped black's bishop immediately, and so that would be the end of the game. I'm sure I miss other tactics like this fairly often, but I just happened to notice that one as I was saying it. I noticed that there was something wrong, so I was sort of determined to straighten that out this week. Okay, so without further ado, let's return to the Kramnik-Carlsen game that we began last week to look at some of the details of the main line. There are many important possibilities, and I'm going to go on at some length, but I think fortunately that the game excerpts that I'll be showing are extremely instructive. So anyway, the game started differently than what I just showed you. It started with a traditional Queen's Gambit declined, but then transposed. And white played, there's the bishop e7 move we were talking about, and white played the main move bishop f4, e3. We've seen all this several times now, and this main move. Now last week we looked at a game with Topalov as white versus Kramnik in the recent candidates tournament, which went knight bd7, c5, and white is not only theoretically a little bit better here, but he won this game very convincingly against Kramnik, which is no easy matter. In this game, black plays the traditional move we've seen quite a few times, and white always takes after c5, because otherwise black's going to take, and really the bishop isn't all that well placed for the kind of position that results. I might have to just take my word for that a little bit. And black recaptures, and one reason d takes c is not surrendering as much center as it sometimes might appear to be is that black has moved this bishop twice, so white's gained some time. And here white plays this move. He could also play a3. Oh, he plays a3, excuse me. He could also play queen c2 right away. We've seen that. Black plays here, and now white plays queen c2. So it's the same thing as queen c2 followed by a3. And by the way, this is an interesting position. I want to show you this old line, which Topalov played, for example. Well, practically everyone played it at some point. It turns out knight takes is black's best move here. This position is actually quite interesting. You could play this way. one idea is right away playing bishop takes h7 check, king takes, queen c2 check, and taking here with an extra pawn and a good position. And typically, therefore, bishop b6 follows and castles, and this position's come up quite a few times. One of white's main points is to use his kingside majority if black ever plays this apparently freeing move. White's going to play here. And then these 4 pawns against these 3 are kind of nice, and they're attacking chances. Now, I think black's pretty much solved his problems in this position. I'm not even quite up with the latest theory, but it's an option, and it's had some success in the past, so it's something you can think about whether it's theoretically equal or not. But in our game, we're still looking at this main line, and black plays that again. Now here, this is the last time we'll look at this position. I want to show some black options, which are very, very instructive. I mentioned I'd show some of this before. Move queen e7 is very logical. Then there's no b4 to worry about, and there's maybe some e5 ideas. Okay, it is possible for white to castle here, and this can get very complicated because black can try to break through and then count upon the fact that he has this little fork here. But then white plays here, and if you look at this for a while, it turns out white's somewhat better. Not by a lot, but it does favor white. But of course black doesn't have to play d4, and castles is not. It exposes white's king a little and is not necessarily considered that good. A much safer move is the one we've been making anyway, which is this move. This really does stop d4. And black tends to play here. Now e5 is potentially a problem, so white really stops that. And because e5 is going to allow a knight into d5 now. So black captures, very natural move. And white takes, black takes. You know, this bishop isn't so good and this isn't developed, so white has some advantage here. He's simply more active here. Small advantage. Comes back. This is a sample line. Bishop comes back because he's a little awkward getting out of that pin. And white simply castles. And black has to develop a little bit slowly. So white plays here. And that's a small advantage. It's irritating for black to play. Even strong players can lose this position as black. Okay, so let's go back and look at another move that black can play, which is simply to take, and that's just a mistake because it loses time. The bishop doesn't have to move twice. The rook's coming to d1 quickly. Now, if this move, rook d1, maybe I won't show you that. White gets a similar advantage to what he got last time. He just takes the file too early, and if black exchanges on the file, then white brings the other rook there. So maybe this move is a little more interesting here. And white castles, and black tries to get his pieces out. Just can't get the move e5 in. So he's going to stand fairly passively. This is an exemplary game. White played here and back, and white played here. Little ideas of there after maybe making a move like this, maybe making a move like knight g5. In fact, knight g5 was a good move. I should point that out. This is quite a good move because if this move, which looks to expel the knight, then we have this position, which is perhaps even stronger for white than it looks. Black is really tied down. This is pretty much a winning position. So that one, knight g5, was a strong move. He plays bishop b1 in the game, which is also a good move, and then starts advancing the center, threatening to play e5 and then checkmate if the knight moves. And it just turns out that white's just doing very well. Now he's got threats of indirect threats on that square. Also bishop h6 is an idea. And if black plays here, which he did, then in this game, then that turned out to be a winning position due to black's kingside weaknesses and a lack of defenders. That's from a game Kosteniuk-Zatonsky, two strong women players. Okay, and let's look at another. I know these are not strictly speaking lines that you memorize. Nothing in this particular series, it's just not, it doesn't lend itself to a lot of memorization. It doesn't hurt to memorize a few lines, but mostly we're just showing you ideas that have been played. There are a lot of them, and some of the themes. If black plays this move immediately, castles, of course, there's a lot of pressure here right away, and black really has to try this. And then the best move is to just capture here with the idea of forking on d4 and really destroying black's center. This has happened before, this move, trying to pin this knight and then in return for a pawn getting a lot of pressure. But white has a nice move here, just retreating, so he hasn't lost the bishop pair. Excuse me, black took this first. My fault. Rather naturally, you can imagine that he took this first. And now this nice move. And white has the bishop pair. White can also play the move f4. That's not bad either. In both cases, white has an advantage. So that's d4. So in the game, we see again the old main line, the one we've seen several times with the queen a5 and rook d1. That's our idea. Remember rook d1, and if black plays slowly, like bishop e7, which is one of the moves we mentioned, then this slow move, that's rook d1 and bishop e2. Yeah, that would happen against rook d8 also. A little bit odd to go this slowly, but it works quite well because the pressure is still on black's center. It turns out that maybe the queen's not that well placed on e5 in this particular position. In this game, black plays that move, and in the games last week we saw this move. This was the Sokolov-Meyer game, and it turned out that queen takes it. B takes e3 gives maybe a small advantage, but this is the one that led to the very interesting endgame with after black captures. That was a very instructive game. So here in this game, black doesn't want to go into that, and white takes. And Carlsen plays this move, very logical, just trying to get rid of the bishops. Excuse me. At this point we're still in theory, so he probably understood that move, or had looked at this move here, and now there's pressure in the center and on d5, so black wants to hurry to get going, but theory indicates that white's better in these positions. There have been a few games. So one main line, for example, here, just as an instructive move, is to just walk in. It looks like this hurts the pin, but of course the queen's a little vulnerable too. So if he takes, rook takes d5, or even bishop takes d5 is better. So in this game, black tried here, and white had that nice move. Threatening knight takes and mate, and so black played. Now if black plays here, then knight e7 check, and bishop f7 is a nice trick, because there's no way to really defend f7 properly after that move. White just gets too much pressure here. So instead of that, instead of g6, which just doesn't work, black tried here, blocking off the queen, but as you can imagine, things are just too loose here. White found this sequence. If this, then just here. Well, actually, let's take a look at that. On that move, white's actually going to play here, threatening here, and after that, that'll be threatening here. So there's actually no really good defense here. If takes here, then, like I say, there's this fork going on. So that's a little tactic. I'm going a little too far afield here. Carlsen just attacks that instead. Now white could get a little tiny edge with this, but it's probably defensible by black, and at these top levels white is trying to play for a win. Now black takes that naturally, and this is sort of a standard idea. These doubled pawns are restraining the move e5, the freeing move e5, which also kind of frees white's pieces too and gives up the e5 square. So this structure, even though it looks a little funny for white, is used quite a lot. He tries this move. Basically, this is going to free g7 for the bishop on e7, because the bishop's going to go like this. And black has to watch out for his kingside defense in this kind of position. For example, rook d8 takes, and he's going to win, white's going to win the d file anyway. So black brings his bishop a little bit back, but his queen a little bit back for defense, but then this move turns out to be quite strong because it's stripping open the kingside defenses. For example, that's strong, and if he doesn't play that, and this is a game by the way, then white's going to get a big advantage. Here he attacks the bishop on d7, the bishop moves, now e6 is very weak, and in fact this move is very nice, because if black takes, there's going to be a mate on g8, or at least he'll win the bishop back, so he's going to win material. Comes back, and then this nice little move, simply threatening to go to g6, e6, excuse me. The idea that being that on takes, we have this attacking the queen and also threatening a discovered attack. So that was a game, and these are all games. So you can see that this position is considered important by good players. So black simply plays here. Carlsen plays there. Kramnik makes a useful move and waits to see how black intends to get his pieces out. Now one game here went like this, and here and here. Knight b5 was a good move, by the way, there. So white's already better here. And here, which is a mistake, even though the rook's pinned. This move didn't work out well because of this nice move attacking the queen. And then after capturing, attacking the queen again. And after this move, still trying to keep some sort of coordination, white takes. It has really an overwhelming attack here. This actually was a nice finish. Hitting b7, black ignores that, and then after this there's this problem with the queen getting trapped with moves like h3 or f3, and black actually has to resign. This is from a game of Pish and Italik, two very strong players. So back to our game. These are just instructive. Otherwise, I'm not trying to make you memorize anything or claim that white has a forced win, but you can see that white has certain practical advantages. Now this is an interesting pawn sacrifice that sets Carlsen a lot of problems. Objectively, just to show that white has an advantage, this move is quite good. That's Shipov's suggestion. Burgess here analyzes all kinds of lines and concludes that white is retaining the advantage. That's kind of a nice practical move, just opening up lines. E takes f5 is pretty disastrous because this move is strong, hitting here. So instead of that, g takes f5, natural move. But white sneaks in, not only attacking here, but sneaking over here to the dark squares. Black counterattacks. The idea is if queen takes, then rook d8 is going to be a strong move, trapping the queen. But white just ignores that and starts aiming to the king side. Again, a defender has left the king side. So Kramnik is having a good time here. And white keeps attacking. Well, this poses a real problem because black really doesn't want to take that and give up all the dark squares, but he has to. And now it's really just a matter of technique. Wastes a little time because he's probably short on time. Pins the knight and is very strongly thinking about the move bishop takes e6, for example, which will just rip open black's king. One more check. Now notice that clever little move was, unfortunately, he's going to lose to knight b5, of course, winning the queen. And so black plays back again. More waste of time here, and white plays knight b5. So this is really getting to the point of not being defensible. Black retreats. Unfortunately, otherwise, if he plays the queen back, white's just going to take that pawn and threaten this kind of move. And this is over very quickly. Rook e6 check won by force. He really should have played that, a more interesting thing, but I won't show you that because we don't want to lose too much time here. It's a nice geometric thing. You can look at it. Rook e6 followed by captures, and then queen takes e6 check, and then b4. And then there's nice geometry with moves like queen d6, bishop e6, and queen f8. So in fact, that really is worth seeing. That's kind of cute. I have to show you that one. That's actually kind of important. Or not important, but it's instructive as a tactical device. b4, getting rid of the defender. Now check. Here. And bishop here, threatening checkmate. Only one move. And then this nice move here, forcing that, and then a checkmate. Pretty position. I like that one. And we're really getting behind here. It's going to be a long lecture, I'm afraid. So b4 happens, and black really has to take that because queen b6, rook takes e6 check is the line we just saw. And now I really don't have to go much further, I don't think. You can see how overwhelming this is. It's good to protect this a1 square rather than just take this right away because queen a1 check could be an issue. And now he's going to take that knight. There's you could look at other defenses after queen f5 check, but they're very simple. And in fact, I think this is the end of the game because black is facing a quick mate, or maybe huge material losses. This is an immediate checkmate. That's forced. Then queen here is going to mate in 2 moves. And instead of queen b4, where can he go? He can come back. That looks like a decent defensive move. But then again, we have this check. And then we have this check. And then we have this check. White just moves closer and closer. And now the easiest way to play this is here, threatening queen d6. And if black takes, we have this standard idea. Very nice. So that's a very nice game. I took way too long on it, but it's an important game between two world champions. And that's always a nice thing to see some world champions. So let's see one more game here. Okay, now we're going to see our first 4th move alternative. Now notice this is a different move order, but gets to, guess what? Very familiar position. And this time black plays another 4th move. We'll look at a couple of these. That's probably the most common alternative. I'm going to suggest simply playing an exchange variation here. Graham Burgess in his book recommends this, but it's quite complicated, and black has a lot of choices. One popular line is simply here, and then defend that, and white gets space, but he also gives up 2 bishops, and it could be that white's better here, but it's certainly not easy. It's interesting. I don't see white having much in the way of advantage here, but we're going to go with this move here, which may also not yield a definite advantage, but it yields a practical one and scores very well. And now bishop f4. So this is one form of the Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation in which white aims for just sort of gradual pressure. He has the C file, for example. If you know the exchange variation, there are many similar themes. Now c6 just defends d5, and then white should just play e3 and bishop d3, or maybe even here. And then there's even a few tricks. Now generally this is simply a positional advantage for white. It's nice. Turns out it's nice to have the bishop here instead of here. Gives white a little bit of an advantage in this position. But there's also some tricks. I mean, if black plays a move like this, I think I had this in one game. Here, and if here, sort of natural, getting ready to play sort of normal moves, then white has this move. So rook e8 is just a blunder because knight c7 is coming, and if takes, the queen's trapped. Kind of silly, but a little side point to make here. Another move here, a good move, a common move, is bishop e4. That just really emphasizes that control of that square. But still, I think white's a little better. This is a good move. And now you really don't want to give up the bishop pair for nothing, so that's the main move. And white takes, as so often after c5, he just plays d takes c5, opening the d file and not losing any time. Black plays here. These are all moves that have been played quite a bit. White attacks that bishop, black captures, and this time white captures this way. And this is the game Aronian Elyanov, Nalchik 2009. And white's bishop pair is really effective here. If black plays here, queen here threatens this, and black certainly doesn't want to straighten out white's pawn structure and at the same time have to deal with 2 bishops. So the more common move, and the move played in this game, is that move. White still plays this. Black plays here. White plays this nice move, just ignoring that pawn, blocking off the threat. But white now is threatening f3, and if knight takes, bishop d2, and the knight on c3 will be trapped. So this is a good position for him. If queen takes, looks natural, right? But in this position, white simply wins because of the move knight b5 coming. This is a real problem, something like this, and there's really no defense for all these dark squares. So that's roughly how bishop b4 might go. More details, but interesting, I think. So knight b6 is played, a common move. White stops this move for the moment. Black can enforce it, and does. He's ready to play bishop f5. The only problem is that does create some weaknesses, and also takes an extra move. And white plays this move. The idea is if there's ever a knight h5 or some other attack, then the bishop has a knight square there. And maybe g4 will happen at some point. Probably it's a little easier to just play here, and because black's knight is not that well placed, and white has quite a here, and white has quite a lead in development. White really does have a slight advantage here. No counterplay for black. That's really part of the problem. But white plays this move instead, excuse me, and gets an escape square. Black naturally attacks the queen, but there's pressure down here and a little bit of pressure there, and so it turns out white has some small advantage here, not much. White has to develop first, of course, and then black plays this strange plan. I don't think exchanging this bishop is a really good idea. Even if black seems to have a pretty good grip on the center, I think the problem is that he has no permanent outposts and certainly no attack, so white can take his time to consolidate and build up before using his bishops to support some sort of breakthrough, either a pawn breakthrough or, well, some sort of pawn breakthrough or space gain. Sort of a standard idea. Unless black has an attack or an outpost, then white tends to stand better if he has two bishops. So he probes a little on the queen side, threatening a5. And then the knight starts. This is a nice maneuver, or at least potential maneuver. The knight really has nowhere to go from here. All these squares are covered. But if he can go to here and here, then there's two very nice squares, especially c5. So that's the plan. And black naturally tries to stop that plan. Now first he has to protect that pawn so he can move that knight, which is obviously very badly placed. White goes ahead with his plan. Black threatens here. But that's a move that allows white to change the pawn structure in another way. Gives white a new option. It's a nice aggressive move, but you'll see that after this move, white can now take here. And even though he's wasted a lot of time, he has to come back again, and he no longer has the two bishops. Now he has a big structural advantage. He's an advantage on the queen. That rook is not very well placed. He has good attacking chances in the center, advancing here, and he's going to put pressure on that pawn, and it turns out it's a little awkward to defend that. So black plays here, defending it. One problem is he can't play f5, for example, because if he plays for this move, trying to get f5 in, which would be nice, then this move wins the f pawn. So that's not possible. So you can see white has this nagging advantage here. Black defends well, but still has problems, and the main problem now is that white is able to put both of his rooks in the center and make a central break. So white's going to have some advantage, and it turns out it turns into a rather considerable advantage. Just goes ahead and plays that in spite of apparent simplification. Now on a move like this and this, we find that white's threatening rook c7. He's also threatening moves like queen b5 with great pressure. You can look at that for a while, but this is pretty much winning actually. So black has to let that sit there for a second. I mean, if this move is even worse because of the here, attacking here, and once the rook moves, there's going to be a fork, plus a tremendous position. So black correctly ignores that. White retreats. Queen c2 might have been slightly more accurate, but it's not that important. Black defends well now because, again, taking twice here with queen d5 just simply doesn't work out. Maybe I should show you that, but it just doesn't. This doesn't work. Rook c7 is a really big threat, and if he tries to respond to that threat by covering the second rank, which is certainly a logical idea, then just this simple move is quite good. The idea is to play rook d4 or rook c6. Pretty soon one of these queenside pawns will fall, and also the center is exposed. So instead of that, black plays this move, a good move. It weakens, in fact, that move is actually inaccurate. White should play here with a considerable advantage. It's hard to play these positions accurately. It just turns out that he shouldn't let the queen defend the c-pawn with tempo, which is what he does with the very natural move, rook here. And also white's achieving something very nice here, which is that black gets the rooks off, which is very desirable, but in doing so, white actually wins a pawn. The problem is that it's a little bit, the technical side is very difficult. Possibly white's just winning this, but it's not so easy because what happens is these pawns get weak. Now, I don't know for sure that this is a win. White certainly makes it look like a win, partly because Well, even though this is difficult to convert, black's exposed king is helping. So white actually gives back the pawn for activity. He could also play this move g4 is very effective, because after that knight e4 has threats of queen e6 check and knight e5 or knight d6, followed by queen c4 d5 check, and that's very strong, as you can confirm easily, whereas bishop takes allows check and the king has to move and then the queen takes. So g4 was quite a good move, but knight d5 works out very well. I'm not going to go into any details here. Black doesn't make the best defensive moves, but it's really hard to do so. This queen g8 move has to be played soon, as it turns out. And now it's turning into just a win. h5 is probably not best. That's a nice anchor square, but it's so hard to find good moves here. And now, of course, this one's a big problem. In fact, this game's just completely over here. Black defends that square, but now f5 is a breakthrough. Check, and that move, and black simply resigns. There's knight here threatened, and there's two passed pawns, and even quicker it turns out this move, because black actually doesn't have any way out of losing the queen, because, well, just for example, if something like this, and you have this move, threatening here, and mate's going to follow very quickly. So very nice game, and I hope you got something out of looking at these various versions of bishop f4. And in this case, the second game, we looked at the move knight bd7. Next week we'll finish with another fourth move or two, and then move on to earlier deviations by black, and we'll get through the whole Queen's Gambit decline in a few more lectures. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you again next week.